Hello guys, the next very important tactical motive we're going to discuss is discovered attack. What is discovered attack? Well, it's a situation on the board where one of the pieces gives way to another. By means of making a move of a piece or a pawn, we're revealing another piece, we are increasing its scope, and as a result of such a move sequence, another piece is under attack. This is of course just a definition, and it's going to be better depicted if we use an example. And as usual, I prepared a couple of examples. Of course, every single one is taken from games. This particular is taken from a game played between two very famous players. White was the late Viktor Korchnoi, and the other Lajos Portis from Hungary. I'm pretty sure you know Korchnoi better, but for those of you who watched my previous video series, then Lajos Portis is quite a frequent guest, because he was also a very strong player from Hungary and played a couple of interesting games throughout his chess career. So basically this is the position that should be the most interesting for us. And in this position, and by the way, the game itself is also very interesting, and Korchnoi had to face a very interesting novelty in Ray Lopez, so I strongly encourage you to take a look at that in your free time. Still, in this very position, in order to neutralize Black's pressure along the d-file, Korchnoi went knight d5, and this was a mistake apparently, because after bishop takes d5, e takes d5, now we have time to take advantage of what we discussed as discovered attack. So, as mentioned before, in order to be sure that you're a good tactical player, that your tactical vision is sharp, quick, and you find tactical motives in a nick of time, what you need to do is to look at the entire board, not necessarily at the part of the board where your pieces are placed, because after all, you're going to attack your opponent's pieces, so you need to use pieces that are placed, your pieces that are placed on a particular part of the board. But sometimes your opponent's pieces are going to be placed totally in a different on a different part of the board, so you will need to be able to visualize those connections between the pieces and the way they are arranged. In this case, it's also very useful, as actually in most cases, in cases of most tactical motives, it's good to find which pieces of your opponents are not protected, or which will not be protected as a result of your tactical motive which is going to be executed. So here in this case, what we actually spot, what you should spot, is that this knight on c4 doesn't have enough protection. How can we use it? What can be done about this? Well, we also have a queen on h4, so whenever you spot that two pieces are placed on the same file or rack or diagonal, here in this case it's 4th rank, then a little light bulb should light just above your head. So queen on h4 indirectly may have to do something with the knight on c4. So what do we need in order to attack this knight on c4? Well, we need to make a move with the pawns, so we just play g3, and as a result we attack the knight on c4. This is discovered attack, so we had a pawn, we had something on the way of the queen and the knight, placed between the queen and the knight. We move a pawn, we make a move with the pawn, increasing the scope of the queen, and making this attack occur on the board. Of course, if it only was for the fact that the knight is under attack, then white is just fine with it. He can just take on e5 or play any other move, play queen e2, pretty much whatever he wishes to. The problem here is that besides the attack on the knight on c4, there was also a very important g takes f2 threat. Also, queen takes h2 threat, or g takes h2 threat. This is actually the least important, but of course white needs to consider all of that. So in fact you might say that, okay, on one hand this is discovered attack, but this is also a double attack in a way, because the pawn on g3 attacks the pawn on f2, and at the same time, in the very same position, the queen attacks the knight on c4. So that's why it doesn't really matter how you call a tactical motive. At the end of the day, what's important is what's on the board and what problems your opponent is faced with. Here, after g3, of course, white wants to minimize his material loss, so therefore he's most likely going to take on g3. If knight e3 is played, or knight e5, or pretty much any other move, of course not queen h3, g takes f2 is played, king f1 is needed, and then we win the rook. Of course white will take it, we can just simplify the position, we're up a rook. So this is not the continuation that should be white should opt for. Instead, h takes g3, queen c4, b3 was played in the game, and of course Korchnoi didn't want to resign, especially considering black's slightly exposed king. But at the end of the day, after the following sequence, which is going to be shown by me very quickly, as you see, unexpected kingside castle just to consolidate, connect the rooks, I think it's worth showing a couple of moves more, because the conclusion of this game was also very nice. e3, bishop e3, queen h1, king e2 was not played, because actually after king e2, rook takes e3. This is another tactical variation I wanted to show you. F takes e3, queen takes g2, the rook on d file cuts off the white king along the d. Rook f2 is the only move, and after rook f2, of course, we just give checkmate in 1. I know that this was quite quickly shown by me, so feel free to just use the PGN attached to the scores, or just watch the video a bit slower. The purpose of this exercise was just to show you how the definition of discovered attack should be understood, and how you can actually utilize this tactical motive in your own games. Okay, assuming that everything is understandable for you, let's move on to the next one. Here's the position, which is far more complex. As you see, the center is closed. It's also an example taken from one of the games. This time we don't really see chess stars of the caliber of either Korchnoi or Lajos Portish playing. Still, this was just quite a high-level game. Black is on move, and the whole point that needs to be realized here is again the way the pieces are arranged one to another. So how they actually what are the connections between them, how they interfere with one with another, and what happens if one of them disappears. What are the consequences? So first thing we should notice is that the black rook is placed on the same file as the white queen. So assuming that everything will disappear from the D file, there might be some tactical issue. Also, the knights, of course, are attacking each other. And the last thing is that will probably make the thing clear. The bishop on g7 is attacking the pawn on e5. Okay, so what should be done about this? As usual, I'm going to encourage you to try at least to solve it on your own. And for those of you who still need a hint, well, make sure that you don't only look for logical moves. Sometimes in chess you just need to do something non-standard in order to first of all surprise your opponent and make something impossible possible. So here the discovered attack executed is bishop takes e5, and the whole idea is connected with the fact that after d takes e5, black just takes knight f4. So we sacrifice the bishop temporarily, of course, so that after white takes, so after one of the objects disappears from the D file, then we can take on f4, winning the knight and still attacking the queen, and potentially in the next move, as you see, knight e2 can be played thanks to the fact that the bishop on a6 protects the e2 square. So after bishop takes e5 in the game, white went knight takes g6, h takes g6, so knight takes g6 was an in-between move. Of course, now after the knight took on g6, the knight will not take on f4. This is why white took on g6, just to gain a pawn. After takes, d takes e5, and again, what should black do? Well, if you answered knight f4, it's correct. Knight f4, again hitting the queen, so that's the discovered attack. And the reason for playing that is actually that after knight e2 in the very next move, we're going to win an exchange. Please also note that if only we change the move order, so if we play knight takes f4 first, then after either g takes f4, which results in this very peculiar pawn structure, or after e takes f4, which may look a bit more logical, although I'm not sure if it's better, then the pawn on e5 is protected twice, so we don't really have enough time to execute our bishop takes e5 idea. Therefore, bishop takes e5 is needed. Of course, whenever you opt for a continuation like that, you need to be sure that you considered all of the options at white's disposal. And here what comes to mind is knight takes d5 as an alternative. It's also quite a sharp continuation. It involves the capture, so of course we need to consider that at least. And here, after rook takes d5, again we use the fact that there is a pin. The pawn on d4 cannot really move. It cannot take the bishop because rook takes d2 wins the queen. On the other hand, white can go for knight c5, hitting our rook on d5, and after rook d8, for instance, go for a continuation like that. So this this line is, I'm showing this to you to show you that even if you find something which looks very nicely, but the evaluation is not satisfactory, you should probably not go for the continuation you have been calculating. So maybe there is a way to improve on your play, and in this particular case I'm not really sure if there is. If there is one, you might of course just consider playing c takes d5, right? So this is an alternative, and this is most likely the best what black can do, because after d takes e5 we take on e4, and this is going to be, we're still up material, and white still has problems with his pawn structure, and in this case, if white plays knight c5, we of course need to make a move with the bishop, but at least we're not losing any pawn. We can play bishop d6, we can play bishop f6, and well, there are very realistic chances that black will be able to win this game. Okay, so this is it. This was another example of discovered attack. Let's move on to another one. I really like this example because well, it was taken from Grandmaster's game. One of the players was Georgiu, the Romanian player, the other Wolfgang Ullmann from Germany, and it's a very clear case of a discovered attack, although assuming that the level of the puzzles increase with each and every exercise, this could be argued that it's a bit more difficult, because it involves a brave decision. So here we have white to move. As you see, the white rook is under attack. On the other hand, if the rook makes a move, then there is the attack of the bishop on g2 attacking the queen on c6. So we already see what sort of discovered attack might be going on here. And definitely this is something that white should seriously investigate. So the rook on e4, the bishop on g2, the queen on c6, and also behind there is a rook on a8. Of course, we still need to remember that black is up in exchange, so a mere continuation resulting in white taking back the material is most likely not going to be satisfactory. Of course, in the game you don't know it. In the game you need to evaluate everything on your own. You need to know whether winning an exchange is enough, whether you should opt for equalizing the position, or should you attack. No one will tell you that. So therefore, first, in order to make sure that you're going to be a good tactical player, you need to solve puzzles. This is a practical tip, training tip, and it's probably not really mysterious and everyone knows it, but this is sad but true. Practice makes perfect, and in case of tactics it's depicted in a great way. Because you will not find in the game what you haven't found in your training session. So we know that probably we'll need to make a move of the rook and then attack the queen. Then now it's all about figuring the exact move order. So the first thing that might come in mind is that, okay, there's also queen on a1. What if we combine all of these things so that at the end of the day black will also have problem with his king? So some of you, again, feel free to try to solve it. Some of you may think that the right move here is rook g4, and indeed it looks like a very tempting continuation. And actually, I would reward you with sort of a half of a point for this idea, because it's a nice combination of all of the motives we have so far learned. So obviously black cannot take on g4. If he takes on d6, which is the most logical move, we can take on f6. So we sort of use this covered attack to bring more pieces into action. Bishop takes a8 is a threat, queen takes g7 is a threat, and if black plays g6, we can use this covered attack again. E takes f7, rook f7, queen d6, we win a queen. Looks beautiful. The only problem is that after queen takes f6, black still has some defensive resource. He can play queen d1 check with a double attack, king h2, queen takes g4. And, well, we lost the rook. The rook on g4 no longer pins the pawn on g7. The queen is under attack. Black has, well, an overwhelming material advantage. It won't simply work. So this is not it. Although we see that there is something going on g-file, something on h1's a8 diagonal. The queen on c6 needs to be taken care of. So now we need to figure out a better way to deal with the things. So what if we first just get our material back, just a little bit? So first we take the bishop with the bishop on f8. In order to find that move, you need to realize that after knight takes e4, there's a very unpleasant surprise, queen takes g7. So from the corner of the board, the white queen goes to nearly the other corner of the board, giving checkmate. That's why it's important to spot the arrangement of the pieces, the way the pieces are connected, and the way they cooperate with each other. And also, if you don't look at the entire board, you will just most likely miss this queen takes g7 move. This is the perfect proof why in the process of calculation you still need to look at the entire board at the same time. So after bishop takes f8, black obviously cannot take on e4, and this is actually the game continuation. And black went rook takes f8, which is actually a losing mistake. Although king takes f8 would not really help black that much. And now we come to the most important moment of the game. Again, rook takes g4 doesn't really work, because on rook takes g4, black this time has queen takes e6, and he's escaping with the queen, at the same time protecting the knight on f6. What if, instead of that, we change the move order? So the trick I've been mentioning to you a moment ago in one of the previous clips. You change the move order, so make the first move in your calculation the second and the second the first. So our first move was rook g4, and the intention was to play queen takes f6. what if we play queen takes f6 as first move and only rook takes rook g4 as the second? And this is the result. Queen takes, g takes, rook g4. Yes, we did sacrifice a queen temporarily, but we're getting it back with dividends, because at the end of the day, after this very forcing continuation, we also win the knight. And of course we get a winning position. It will still require some endgame technique, because obviously you need to know how to win with disadvantage, but honestly it's quite straightforward, or at least it should be. Whenever you calculate a line like that, of course you still need to look at the alternatives for your opponent. So what if black opted for an in-between move, queen e4? This is actually not a bad move at all. It's a very interesting try. And now, here comes, I think, the most difficult part in this entire line. Because if, let's say, you want to play e takes f7, intending to meet rook takes f7 with queen d8, rook f8, queen takes f8, king f8, bishop e4, this is the only continuation that actually makes sense, then you will be very unpleasantly surprised after king h8. So remember that in chess, capturing is not compulsory. And here, after queen d6, well, in fact, queen e1, king h2 is still actually lost for black, because as you see, black is not able to get back with the queen to protect the rook on f8. If he moves the rook, then we just promote and give checkmate. But instead, black can go for queen b1 check, king h2, and queen b8. So with this very nice maneuver, he went on to protecting the rook. And this endgame is still actually, it's not the end of calculation, but after bishop c6, intending bishop e8, I think after g6, king g7, bishop e8, black should win because of the c-pawn. But instead of that, white has a very nice move at his disposal. Again, feel free to calculate this. In order not to make this video too longish, I will just give you the answer. If you want, just pause the video, take as much time as you need. So the right move here is not e takes f7, but queen takes f7. King h8, of course, queen f8 wins. Rook f7 is the only move, therefore, and e takes f7 with a check. King takes bishop e4. We win this endgame. I think it's a very nice example, and the amount of lines that you need to calculate here is quite impressive. Well, of course, practice makes perfect, and at some point this will be just a piece of cake for you. So if you didn't find everything at the end, at the very beginning, don't feel discouraged. Practice makes perfect, and at some point this will be just very easy for you. Okay, I think it's time for us to move on. And the next example I wanted to show you is taken from the game played between Peterson and Ortiz. Very messy position, and one that definitely requires a fresh look with spotting all of the possibilities. As you see, white has a huge material advantage. His only problem is that his king is still in the center, and most of his pieces are undeveloped. If it was white to move, of course, white just takes on e7, but unfortunately for white, it is black's turn, and black manages to finish this game by force. So here again, look at how the pieces are arranged, what are they attacking, how you can use the pieces that you have. Look at the entire board, look at not only the pieces, this time also at the squares, which are not protected and which should, in your opinion, be protected. And yeah, feel free to calculate this. I think it's a great training position with many things going on. The solution is actually quite quick, quite short, so I'm confident you'll just find it sooner or later. For those of you who want to make it a most effective training experience, just feel free to pause the video, please do it, because now I'm going to show you how you should approach a position like that. So first, the king is not protected, and what is relevant here is those major pieces. Yeah, let's actually make this arrow a bit longer. So those major pieces that are hitting indirectly along E and D files. So this means that if we manage to bring one or two of them optimally, we might be able to get direct access to the white king. And of course, a sharp, quick, forceful solution is required here, because the queen on e7 is under attack, and a move like h takes g6 will just bring new checks, queen takes g6, and white gets enough time to consolidate his position, because, well, thanks to his material advantage, he can even give back a piece or two and still be up some material. So instead of that, we just opt for direct attack, a checkmate attack in fact, and we start with knight takes c2. It's a very logical continuation. King f1, and what we do here is we don't take the rook on a1. For some of you, it might still be tempting to take a free piece if you see it. No, it's not the right approach. And at this point, again, we use the heavy pieces. We have the major pieces. Try to get access to the white king. What is also important here is to find the differences between particular move orders, because there are differences. So you might feel that in order to get the access to the white king, you want to sort of get rid of the knight and somehow jump with your queen. On e1 at the end. So you might be tempted to play knight g3. And if only white played h takes g3, you have rook d1 check, bishop d1, queen e1 check. So this is how it could be approached. The only problem here is that h takes g3 is not the only move that white can go for, because there is also f takes g3. And after f takes, after rook d1, bishop d1, queen e1 is the same, but white can play king f2. And this is a completely different position. In fact, even though black can take the rook, again the queen is hanging on e7. So queen c5 could be played. Take, king f3, that's quite compulsory. After rook h1, well, we get again a very, very complex position, but again, as I told you, white is up material, so for the sake of just consolidating, he might play a move like knight a3 or knight c3, and in the resulting position, white is actually going to be down material because the bishop and the knight are attacked. Still, white has a couple of pawns, and it's not going to be necessarily that easy for black to play, especially that after bishop f4, h takes g6, a pawn is taken. I'm not so sure actually whether this is even going to be winning for white or not, for black, sorry. Anyway, it's not what you want to get. Here you want to make sure that black is just giving checkmate. So for this reason, again, what we do is change the move order. First we play rook d1 check, and after bishop d1, it's a different way of discovered attack here, because we don't really attack a piece, we attack a square. So we get access to e1 square by means of sacrificing the knight, and after h takes, queen e1 is checkmate. So this is a different sort of attack, discovered attack, but it's still about removing a piece which stands in the line of a piece you want to use. You sacrifice this piece, and after it's gone, you just use your queen and give checkmate. I think the last part was quite straightforward. So let's move on to the last example in this segment. I think this is actually quite complex one. As you see, the position is very double-sided, with black attacking on queen side. Sorry. It's queen side where the white king is placed. It's still queen side. The black queen is very close to getting access to the white king, but there's still the rook on b2 protecting the king. On the other hand, white intends to play knight f6 in his very next move and capture the rook on g8. Black's king is still in the center. And the position is very dynamic, and Black's biggest asset is that he is actually to make the move right now. So what needs to be done regarding the thinking process is, as usual, look at the entire board, look at the way the pieces interact, and find pieces that are not protected in white's position. This is actually quite important. A very typical mistake here for a player which is not necessarily experienced in complex tactics would be to at any cost try to give white checkmate. And my hint for you is that don't get preoccupied with that. Even though your queen is very close to the white king, sometimes it's better just to, you know, win material advantage, a big material advantage, significant one, and then convert your material advantage instead of going for a crazy attack, which will also enable your opponent to get some counterplay. So what Black should do here is take advantage of the unprotected queen on g3. You might wonder how this is supposed to be done. And then, as an answer, well, there comes a queen on a3. So what we need to do is to get rid of the b pawn and get rid of the f pawn. If we play b takes a2, king a1, well, we can try to do things, but Black will not be able to force the white pawn from f3 to go away. So it won't work. Instead, again, we change the move order. We first deal with this little guy. So we play bishop e4 check. In case f takes e4 is played, now we take on a2. There is a check, so everything goes by force. King a1, queen g3. So we win a queen. You might wonder, okay, what happens if king a1? So here's the last puzzle in this section. It's not going to be double attack, and it's a proof that, well, sometimes if your opponent doesn't want to lose material, you just give him checkmate. So Black to move and give checkmate into moves. I think it's quite straightforward. So feel free to solve it. You might need a few seconds, so pause the video. The right move here is, of course, queen takes a2, rook takes, and by means of this nice queen sacrifice, Black wins by force. Okay, and this is it about the discovered attack. In the next chapter, we're going to discuss another tactical motive. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.